I still taste every cup of coffee before I serve it. Not a sip, a real taste, rolling it on my tongue, waiting for the bitterness that doesn't belong, the metallic edge that means something was added. My daughter thinks it's a game. Mommy tastes first. She laughs, clapping her flour-dusted hands. I smile, I don't explain. Some lessons you don't pass to 3-year-olds. Some lessons you absorb into your body until checking becomes breathing, until suspicion becomes love, until the act of protection looks like paranoia to anyone who hasn't been poisoned by family. My grandmother taught me to bake bread at 4 in the morning. She taught me that yeast is alive, that it breathes, that you must feed it and wait and trust the process. She taught me that the best loaves rise slowly, in darkness, in patience. She did not teach me that love could be a weapon, that kindness could be calculation, that the man who brought her flowers every Tuesday was measuring her life in insurance increments. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't know me yet. You don't know about Richard. You don't know about the coffee, the stairs, the knife he kept in his ankle holster for the moment when poison became too slow. My name is Lena. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how my grandmother's boyfriend tried to kill her, and how I made sure he died alone, unloved, and known for exactly what he was. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, this is where we tell the truth about predators who wear cardigans and bring casseroles. If you've ever watched someone you love fall for a smile that didn't reach the eyes, if you've ever been called jealous or paranoid while you were actually being the only one who saw subscribe, we have stories for you every week, and we read every comment. Here's my story. I was 3 when my parents left. Not died, left, walked out of the apartment and never came back. My mother was 22, my father 25, and I was an inconvenience that grew louder and more expensive by the month. They left me with my grandmother on a Saturday. Just for the weekend, my mother said. She never returned. The weekend became 26 years. My grandmother Marta was 50 then, a widow of 5 years. Her husband, my grandfather, dead of a heart attack at his bakery counter, mid-transaction, handing change to a customer who didn't know she was watching a man die. Marta took over the bakery. She raised me in the apartment above it. She taught me to measure flour by feel, to know when dough was ready by the way it pushed back against my palm, to wake at 4 a.m. because bread doesn't wait for convenience. We were a team, a unit, a small country of 2 against the world. She was my mother, my father, my teacher, my refuge. She was also stubborn, proud, and deeply lonely in ways she never admitted until it was almost too late. I left for college at 25. Late by most standards. I'd worked in the bakery through my 20s, taking classes at night, saving money, convinced that higher education was for other people, until Marta sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd taught me to roll dough, where she'd helped me with homework, where she'd held me when I cried about parents who didn't want me and said, "You will go, you will be the first, and you will come back because this bakery needs an educated thief to handle the taxes." I went. Full scholarship 3 states away, a small university with a good accounting program. I called every day. She answered every time, her voice warm with flour and fatigue, telling me about the customers, the new recipes, the gossip of the neighborhood. She was fine, she was always fine, until she wasn't. I came home for summer break at 26. Walked into the bakery at 6 a.m., smelling of airports and exhaustion, expecting the familiar chaos of morning rush, of Marta shouting orders, of employees moving in the choreographed dance I'd learned as a child. Instead, I found quiet. Controlled, gentle, wrong. A man stood behind the counter where Marta should have been. Tall, silver-haired, smiling with teeth that were too white and too even. He wore a cardigan that looked expensive and a watch that looked more so. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth as buttercream. "You must be Lena. Marta talks about you constantly. I'm Richard." Marta emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked different, not older, not ill, but softer, vulnerable in a way that made my stomach clench. She moved toward him, not me. Her hand touched his arm, briefly, possessively. "Lena," she said, but the joy was tempered, shared, divided in a way I'd never experienced. "Richard made coffee. He makes the best coffee. Come sit, tell us everything." I sat, I told them nothing. I watched Richard pour coffee from a thermos he'd brought, my special blend, he called it, smiling, and I watched Marta drink it with eyes closed, grateful, trusting. I watched him watch her drink, his smile fixed, his eyes measuring. "How did you 2 meet?" I asked. "Here," Marta said, glowing. "He came in for pan dulce. We talked for hours. That was, what, 6 months ago?" 5, Richard corrected gently. But who's counting? 5 months, and he was already living in the apartment, already making her coffee, already standing behind her counter like he owned it. I was an accountant, he said, answering my unasked question. Retired now. Decided to enjoy life instead of counting other people's money. Marta is my enjoyment. The words were right. The tone was right, but something in his eyes when he looked at her, when he looked at the bakery, when he looked at me was wrong. It was assessment. Inventory. The look of a man pricing furniture he intended to buy. I stayed for 2 weeks. I watched Richard make coffee every morning. I watched him surprise Marta with gifts, a scarf, a book, a small sculpture for the apartment. I watched him suggest changes to the bakery's operations, helpful advice from his accounting background that Marta implemented without question. I watched him separate her from her routines, her friends, her employees, replacing them with his presence, his preferences, his plans. I tried to talk to her, the night before I left to return to school. Abuela, I said, sitting on her bed, the bed she'd shared with my grandfather for 30 years, now shared with Richard. Do you really know him? Have you checked his background, his previous life? She stiffened. I know him, Lena. I know him better than I knew your grandfather after 30 years. He listens. He cares. He makes me feel, she paused, her voice dropping. He makes me feel young, seen, alive. He's been here 5 months. He lives in your apartment. He makes your coffee. Doesn't that seem fast? I'm 75, she said, sharp now. How much time do you think I have? Should I wait 5 years, 10, until I'm too old to enjoy anything? Richard wants to marry me. He wants to take care of me. You should be happy for me, not jealous. Jealous, the word landed like a slap. I'm not jealous, I'm worried. You're always worried, she said, turning away. That's your nature. But some things are good, Lena. Some people are good. Let me have this. I left the next day. I called more often. I visited when I could. And I watched from a distance as Richard became more entrenched, more necessary, more married to the narrative of their love story. The research started a year later. A visit home, a forgotten driver's license in the bathroom, a name I didn't recognize. Robert Hale. The license was old, expired, hidden in a shoebox in Richard's closet, a closet that had been my grandfather's, that Marta had given him without hesitation. I found it while looking for a blanket, my hands shaking, my mind already knowing what my heart refused. I searched. Not Google, real searches, paid databases, the kind of digging that accounting students learn when studying fraud. Robert Hale, born 1952, 2 marriages, 2 wives dead. Margaret Hale, 68, fell downstairs in their home. Accident. No investigation. Life insurance, $400,000. Dorothy Hale, 71. Medication confusion. Mixed her pills, no investigation. Life insurance, $600,000. Both deaths in different states, both within 2 years of marriage, both leaving Robert Hale comfortable, free, able to retire and enjoy life. Richard was Robert, Robert was Richard, and my grandmother was next. I went to the police. No current crime, they said. Historical deaths, different jurisdictions, closed cases. We can't act on suspicion alone. I went to Marta with printouts, photos, records. She looked at them, then at me, and I saw something break in her face, not belief but resistance. The wall she'd built around Richard, around her own loneliness, around the need to feel young and chosen. You're making this up, she whispered. You're jealous, you want me alone like you. I want you alive, I said, crying now. Abuela, please, look at the dates. The pattern, the insurance, he's not an accountant, he has no work history, he's a professional widower, you're his next pension. She slapped me, hard, her hand, flower rough and strong, across my face. Get out, she said. Get out of my house, I never want to see you again. I left, but I didn't leave her. I moved back to finish my thesis. I told her, told Richard, told the bakery employees. I rented a storage unit, slept there sometimes, but mostly I was in the apartment, watching, waiting, learning. Richard knew. I saw it in his eyes when I appeared at breakfast, when I refused his coffee, when I asked innocent questions about his past. His smile tightened, his patience thinned, and his plan accelerated. Marta started changing. Not dramatically, subtly, the way poison works. She forgot names. She stumbled on stairs. She bruised easily, clumsiness of age, she called it, but I'd never seen her clumsy in my life. She took naps in the afternoon, something she'd never done. She seemed confused during busy hours, overwhelmed by the bakery she'd run for decades. I found the medications. Richard had organized them, helping with her health. Blood pressure pills that were actually sedatives. Vitamins that were anticoagulants in doses too small to detect immediately but large enough to cause internal bleeding over months. The coffee, his special blend, had a new ingredient, bitter, that he explained as an herbal supplement for memory. I took samples. I had them tested. The results were clear. Gradual poisoning, designed to look like age. Designed to culminate in a tragic accident, a fall, a bleed, a confusion that would leave Richard grieving, wealthy, and free. I couldn't confront him. Confrontation would make him faster, more desperate, more dangerous. I couldn't remove Marta. She wouldn't go, wouldn't believe, would choose him over me as she'd already proven. I couldn't call the police. I had no evidence of a crime completed, only a crime in progress, and Richard would destroy what I'd collected before they acted. So I became invisible. Patient. I replaced his sedatives with identical placebos, purchased from a pharmacy 3 towns away. I poured his coffee down the drain and made fresh, watching him drink it without noticing. I took Marta to a doctor in another city, a specialist, I said, for a second opinion, and the doctor confirmed excessive sedation, unauthorized anticoagulants, signs of chronic poisoning. He documented everything. I collected the documents, but it wasn't enough. Richard was careful. He would adjust, adapt, find new methods. I needed him to act, to reveal himself, to become the predator he was in a space where he couldn't hide. I needed a trap, and I needed bait. The dinner was my idea. To celebrate, I said, smiling at Richard with all the warmth I could fake. To welcome Richard properly to the family. To apologize for my suspicion. I was wrong, I see that now. Richard's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe me, but he couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. And he was confident, too confident, after months of success. Months of Marta's decline, months of my apparent acceptance. How lovely, he said, his smile returning. Family together. I invited everyone. The bakery employees, Maria, who'd worked with Marta for 20 years, Jose, who delivered flour since I was a child, Elena, who'd noticed Marta's changes but hadn't spoken. I invited Dr. Chen, the physician who'd examined Marta, who'd confirmed the poisoning. I invited Detective Morrison, private investigator I'd hired, seated as a family friend who was interested in the bakery business. Richard sat at the head of the table, Marta beside him, confused but present, wearing the dress he'd bought her, the jewelry that was his gift. I served the food, traditional dishes, Marta's recipes, prepared by my own hands, and then I served the coffee. My special blend, Richard said, watching Marta lift her cup. Let me prepare it, it's a ritual. No, I said, smiling. I've learned so much from you, Richard, let me show you. I prepared it in the kitchen out of sight. I made his cup exactly as he made Marta's, the same beans, the same water, the same herbal supplement he'd been adding. But the supplement was different, not poison. A powerful diuretic, legal, undetectable, that would create urgent biological need. I served him. He drank. He smiled. He began to tell a story about his accounting days, his retirement dreams, his love for Marta that transcends age. The diuretic worked. Richard excused himself. The restroom, he said, standing smoothly. I'll be just a moment. I waited 30 seconds, then I followed. Marta was already there, in the bathroom, waiting. I'd prepared her. Shown her the documents again, the doctor's report, the pattern of the 2 dead wives. She'd resisted, cried, raged, but she'd finally seen. Finally understood that the love she felt was manufactured, that the youth she felt was sedation, that the future Richard promised was her own death. She stood in the bathroom, facing the door when Richard entered. He stopped, surprised, then smiled, recovering. Marta, my love, I was just what? She asked. Her voice was different. Stronger. The voice of the woman who'd raised me alone, who'd run a bakery through grief and hardship, who'd never been weak even when she was lonely. Just going to prepare another accident. Another fall, another medication confusion. Richard's smile vanished, the mask dropped, and something cold, calculating, predatory emerged. Stupid old woman, he said, his voice low, venomous. You were supposed to die quietly, happy, grateful. I gave you that happiness, attention, the illusion of love. You could have died in peace and I would have mourned beautifully. But no, you had to listen to that jealous granddaughter. You had to ruin everything. He reached down to his ankle, to the holster I'd suspected but never confirmed. He pulled a knife, small, hunting sharp, designed for quick, silent work. Now it has to be fast, he said, advancing. Messy, but I can still work with messy. A robbery, perhaps, an intruder, tragic, but the bathroom door opened. I entered, phone recording, live stream active, the image of Richard with knife raised. Marta against the wall, his words still echoing in the tile. Behind me, Maria Jose Elena, Dr. Chen with medical documents, Detective Morrison with weapon drawn, badge visible. Richard froze, the knife in his hand, the mask gone, the truth finally irrevocably visible. "Drop it," Morrison said. Richard dropped it. The knife clattered on tile, loud as a gunshot. Marta looked at him, not with fear, with something worse. Recognition. The understanding that she'd almost given everything, her bakery, her life, her legacy, to a man who'd never seen her as human, only as inventory. Richard Robert Hale didn't go to prison immediately. I made sure of that. Not because I wanted him free, but because I wanted him known. I released the video, the live stream, the documentation. The pattern of 2 dead wives, the insurance records, the medical reports, the coffee analysis. I gave interviews, I wrote articles. I made Richard's face synonymous with predator before the legal system could process his arrest. The media called it the bakery trap. True crime podcasts dissected my methods. Some called me brilliant. Some called me dangerous. Some asked if I'd entrapped an innocent man. I didn't care. I cared that Marta lived, that she woke up the next morning, that she tasted her own coffee, made by her own hands, and knew it was clean. The legal process was slow. Richard was charged with attempted murder, poisoning, fraud, but I didn't stop. I contacted Margaret Hale's children, Dorothy Hale's sister. I reopened their cases. With the pattern established, with Richard's methods documented, with the media attention creating pressure that prosecutors couldn't ignore, the accidents were reclassified. Murder, 2 counts, plus the attempted murder of Marta. Life without parole. Richard died in prison 4 years later. Cancer, they said, slow, painful, alone. No visitors. No one who believed his claims of innocence. No one who mourned. I didn't attend his funeral, there wasn't one. He was cremated by the state, his ashes disposed of in a location no one recorded. He became what he'd always been, nothing, a void where a person should have been. Marta lived 5 more years. Not perfectly, the poisoning had damaged her kidneys, her memory, her trust in her own judgment. She was sometimes confused, sometimes angry. Sometimes she looked at me with guilt that no words could dissolve, but she lived. She saw me graduate. She saw me open my own bakery, not replacing hers but expanding, a second location where she could visit without the ghosts. She saw me marry late, carefully, to a man who made his own coffee and never asked her to change. She saw me have a daughter, named her Marta, taught her to measure flour by feel, to wake at 4 a.m., to know that yeast is alive and must be fed and trusted. My grandmother died in her sleep in her own bed in the apartment above the bakery where she'd raised me. No poison, no accident. Just age finally claiming what was hers. I still taste every cup of coffee. My daughter, 3 now, flour-dusted, laughing, thinks it's a game. I don't tell her the truth, not yet, maybe never. Some knowledge is too heavy for small shoulders. But I teach her other things, to trust her instincts. To watch eyes, not smiles. To know that love doesn't demand isolation, doesn't replace friends with its own presence, doesn't make you dependent and confused. And I teach her to bake. At 4 a.m. in darkness, in patience, the slow rise, the trust in process, the understanding that the best things, bread, love, survival, take time, attention, and the willingness to wake before the world demands it. I'm Lena. I'm 29 years old. I own a bakery, a daughter, and a habit of checking coffee that my husband understands without asking. I have a grandmother who survived, a predator who didn't, and a life built on the knowledge that love is not what someone says. It's what they do when no one is watching. See you in the next story.